worried a great deal about it. She kept it to herself again, and then she finally talked to Anna, the president's daughter.
They pressured the White House physician, Admiral Ross McIntyre, to send Roosevelt to Bethesda Naval Hospital for a complete examination. Dr. Howard Bruin, the cardiologist who examined him, was horrified by what he found.
He noted that the heart was enlarged, considerably enlarged. He noticed that the blood pressure was elevated in the 180 of about 105-10 range with heart murmurs. And he has a distended aorta. The aorta is the main blood vessel leading from the heart, and it's distended as a result of the hypertension. In other words, he is in a fairly advanced state of congestive heart failure.
And he never asks a question. What are you finding, Doc? What's happening to me? It's as if he didn't want to know. But more damningly, the doctor, Dr. McIntyre, never really told Roosevelt the extent of his illness at that time, somehow assuming that he had the right not to let Roosevelt know.
A team of doctors reviewed Bruin's findings. All agreed and insisted that without a significant reduction in his workload, Roosevelt would be dead within a matter of months. So, in early April, under a veil of secrecy, FDR traveled to Georgetown, South Carolina, to a remote southern plantation owned by the New York financier Bernard Baruch. FDR stayed here for a month. With him was his devoted Daisy, there to ensure the president adhered to doctor's orders.
He reduced his work week to 20 hours a week. Can you imagine? This is the man running a global war, as well as trying to be president of a great country, and he's been told you can't work more than 20 hours a week.
It was a time to adjust to the strict changes insisted on by Bruin and his team. His daily smoking habit was cut from 20 cigarettes a day to 10. For the first time, the presidential diet was monitored, a decision that didn't sit well with the patient.
April 4th, 1944. The dietitian evidently is not prepossessing. Franklin wants to get rid of her, thinks he can do better himself, and is seriously thinking of having a gun brought to him so he can simply shoot all the disagreeable people who keep coming back all the time.
But Roosevelt's recovery was painfully slow. The headaches persisted, as did his tendency to lose focus.
He began to have spells where he would literally fall sort of semi-unconscious or almost fall asleep, and he found it harder and harder to follow a train of thought for very long. You know, he would start to wobble and his mind would wander all over the place.
While he was at the Baruch plantation, FDR insisted he wanted to see the recently widowed Lucy Mercer Rutherford, the woman with whom he'd had an affair 25 years earlier.
FDR was very lonely. I think his wife was away, his mother was dead, and he was feeling, however he showed it on the outside, increasingly gray and tired and wan, and he needed to be cheered up. And I think he reached back to find Lucy Mercer again to bring some warmth back into his life.
So he went to Anna and asked her a very difficult thing, if she would be the one to arrange Lucy's visits when her mother was away so that her mother wouldn't be hurt.
When he asked my mother to do so, she was very upset. She was perfectly well aware that not only would her mother, if she ever found out, be irate, but the chances of her mother finding out eventually were pretty damn good. She knew she was stepping into a situation she could only lose, but as she talked to me about it later, she felt anything that would alleviate Pa's sense of loneliness, anything that would alleviate the health, anything to keep him going till the end of the war, she needed to do.
Away from prying eyes, FDR and Lucy Rutherford would drive out to view the salt marshes that surrounded Baruch's sprawling 17,000-acre estate. This was not the rebirth of a physical relationship, just two old friends with shared memories that reached back to happier times, an escape from military pressures as the long-awaited Allied invasion across the English Channel loomed ahead. June 6, 1944, D-Day. FDR and Churchill ordered more than 150,000 men into action, deployed across the English Channel on 5,000 ships, the largest armada in history. Now, from the White House, the president led the nation in prayer.
Almighty God, our sons, pride of our nation, this day have set upon a mighty endeavor, a struggle to preserve our republic, our religion, and our civilization, and to set free a suffering humanity.
The previous night, FDR told his family that he wanted to retire from public life, but felt that wasn't an option until final victory was secured. That required election to an unprecedented fourth term.
FDR was aware, I believe, clearly aware of his declining health, clearly aware that he had to get out of harness. But there was nobody to replace him. And he knew that until the victory had done. And there is also the matter of pride. No soldier had said, "I've had enough of this," and walked off the battlefield. He was a soldier in that sense, and he was considered as such by the American people. They would have been horrified if he'd said, "I'm not up to the job."
But by the summer of 1944, FDR wasn't up to the job. All his remaining energy was spent perpetuating an illusion, for America was about to re-elect a dying man. In the late 1930s, despite evidence of increasing Nazi anti-Semitism, the State Department opposed liberalizing immigration quotas for German Jews. Eleanor had fiercely objected. FDR had acquiesced. It was an action supported by 71% of Americans, according to a Gallup poll taken in 1938. Late in the war, anecdotal reports of Nazi death camps were heard in Washington, but it wasn't until the summer of 1944 that the military first requested that rail lines leading to Auschwitz be bombed. The plan was rejected because the targets were not considered vital to the prosecution of the war, and in reality, saving Jews was not a priority for FDR.
Would it have been a decisive blow to the Nazi extermination program in sending Jews to Auschwitz? Probably not. But it certainly would have sent a moral message, so to speak. We know what you are doing. We are determined to counter this. And so Roosevelt, in that sense, loses out as some of his moral reputation is blighted, is shadowed by the fact that he doesn't make this decision to do the moral things. It is exaggerated to see him as somehow culpable for the deaths of millions of Jews.
Whatever his culpability, FDR remained narrowly focused on one goal: complete and unconditional German surrender. Victory, he argued, would save the Jews, and every ounce of his diminishing strength would go towards that end. By 1944, he was in a race against his own mortality. The country had been told nothing about Roosevelt's medical condition. Only Doctors McIntyre and Bruin knew the complete story. But for his staff, those who frequently saw the president, the medical crisis was unmistakable. FDR's deterioration is vividly remembered by one of his Secret Service agents, Floyd Boring, who protected FDR from March 1st, 1944, until the day he died.
I noticed it, and I'm sure the rest of the agents noticed it too. He was a little bit weaker. His eyes were sunk more in his head. You could see him fading almost daily. You could see him going downhill. So he was actually a little guy in a big suit at the end. He had gotten down to where he was not physically able to do the job.
But he was determined to summon the strength needed to withstand the rigors of one final campaign. On the